Welcome, I'm John Waite. I'm the Executive Director of the Franklin County Community Development Corporation.
And hi, everyone. I'm Hannah Sobel, and I'm the Program Manager for the PVGrows Investment Fund and the Mass Food Trust programs at Franklin County Community Development Corporation.
And before we get started, Jeff asked us to just give a little background how we got to where we are. And since Hannah is an alumni here, why don't you start out?
So I am a grad of UEP and the Friedman School. I graduated in 2015. Those experiences absolutely set me up for where I'm working today. UEP is where I first got introduced to the world of community economic development. And some of you know that CDCs or community development corporations do all types of community development work, but the work that Franklin County CD does is exclusively community economic development. So I'm really excited that my career now started at UEP. I wrote my UEP thesis about Boston's emerging solidarity food economy. So already I was teed up into what are different ways that communities there's grassroots support for community food systems in an alternative economy sort of world. Penn was one of my thesis readers, so I'm really excited to come full circle with that today. And also, if anyone is a dual degree student with Friedman, there are a lot of really technical scientific skills that surprise me all the time with when those come in handy, whether that's like knowing what a cotyledon is. If anyone has not have extensive farming, the background in agricultural science and policy has absolutely sometimes just blows me away when that comes up. So that's my big plug for UEP, because I know that there are prospective students in the room. And I'll turn it over to John.
So I started out at UMass out in Amherst. That's why I'm back there. But after that, my undergraduate was in business and sports management. And I got to tell this because I'm in Boston, that my first and best job ever probably was with the Boston Celtics, being a sports management major. That only lasted a year, and they didn't win that year. But and then I went off to the Peace Corps. And the Peace Corps is still alive and well. I want to plug it any chance I have. So it's a fantastic opportunity. And I went over to Burkina Faso, and that's actually where I learned a little about agriculture. And I worked with small businesses, and small businesses over there are very small. And they had a micro lending program. Over there, it was like $50 or $100. Over here, it's $50,000 or $100,000, but it's still a lot of similar small business stuff. I came back, and then I went to Columbia University and got my graduate degree there. Then started doing more microfinance work. Worked in Uganda, helped set up a bank, a microfinance bank that did group lending in Uganda with CARE International. Then I went to Uzbekistan for a while, worked with Peace Corps again, did some consulting in actually Gaza and the West Bank and Jordan. And then I went to the Philippines, and it was all about microfinance, hands-on teaching, business assistants and how to set up and run these funds. And so then it was time to come back to the States, have a family, and I picked Western Mass, and I'm so glad I did. Franklin County Community Development Corporation has been around for 46 years. And actually, I went there and I applied to be the lending director. While I was in the process of that interview, the executive director was let go, let's say. And so they asked me to apply for that. So that's just you never know when you apply for things, where it's going to lead you. So I've been out there for 26 years. I just had my anniversary the other day. But what I love about it is it's different every day, because we work with entrepreneurs, we start new programs, things come along. Community development is just an always evolving kind of field. So we do we're there to help do what the community wants, and we do mostly small business development. So it's extraordinary. And then starting this fund 10 years ago was a great adventure that we'll get more into. Mm-hmm. So do I go first with some of the background?
Yeah.
So the Franklin County, so a lot of CDCs, I'm going to use that term, community development corporations, a lot of them do housing. And in the early days, back 46 years ago, we did too, but then other people have done affordable housing. So we focused on economic development and then small business development. And so we provide business assistance to any business, whether it's a hobby who wants to grow, an existing business who's stuck or needs to grow or stabilize. And then we have a loan fund. And we started this loan fund back in the 80s. And now we have about $10 million of revolving loan money for businesses out. And we're still called the Franklin County CDC, but we work in all of Western Mass. So that's the Hamden County, Hampshire County, and Franklin County. So flexible financing is a big thing. And then just being a connector, resources, and things like that. And then we go on to our farm and food programming. So because we're in Western Mass, there's a lot of farmland out there. And the state wanted to build a food processing center. And this is actually before I started there 27 years ago. The state had some money, our organization applied for it, and we got a grant to start a food center. And then I was hired, so I helped start this food center. It's been around for 25 years now. And what it is a big commercial kitchen. We've got big kettles. We can do 300 gallons of sauce. So the idea was that farmers would bring their produce and we could make it into something that's shelf stable and get it out to the stores. So the farmers could add value to their products. Instead of just selling the raw produce, they could actually add value and make more profit off of it. And then we've started the Mass Ag Innovation Center, which is a similar thing, but provides more business assistance to farmers. So I think our first slide said farms are businesses too. So a lot of people don't, but it's a very complicated business, farming. So we're able to help them with their finances. They know the technical skills, they can grow the crops, but we help them with more the finances and how to grow their business and maybe diversify, as most farms now need to in order to survive. And then we're going to talk more about this, but the PVGrows Investment Fund, that was an outgrowth of both, because we were working with farm and food businesses and we're in Western Mass and we had a loan fund. It was kind of a natural fit for us to start the PVGrows. So when Jeff says they found the CDC was part of that network early on, and it just kind of made sense for us to run it. And since then, we've started another program, the Mass Food Trust Program, which Hannah will tell you a little bit more about. So these are some of the things that we do at the food processing center. I think it's 2,000 square foot kitchen, but we can do all kinds of different products. Every day we do a different product in there. So jams and jellies and sauces, a lot of pickling going on. And most of these strawberries, we've done some freezing for a lot of crops like strawberries and blueberries. They come out all in a 3 or 4 week period. So the farmers can sell some of it fresh, but then we try to extend the season for them by freezing it, and they can sell it later on. There's a lot of talk now about food tech and ag tech. So one of the products that we just prototyped the other day, and now I'm going the fish eggs.
Oh, the vegan
caviar.
Yeah.
Vegan caviar. There you go. So who knew? But caviar is a big thing and it's expensive. And so someone's coming up with this vegan caviar now. And it takes a lot of prototyping and to make it, they're trying to make the consistency just like caviar, which is a special consistency. So we can do that. We do prototypes at our place. And it's very helpful. And then we also do some things that aren't local. We make a fudge sauce, Harold's fudge sauce. Anybody know Northampton, Harold's ice cream? You gotta come out there. So everybody loved their fudge sauce, and they didn't have enough room in their kitchen in their ice cream shop. So we make it for them, and then they sell it at grocery stores all over the region. So that's some of the sort of the list of things we do. And again, I think what a lot of our folks feel is the most helpful thing is some of the food science help or the food safety. Like everybody wants to make a product, they got their grandmother's recipe, but it takes a lot more than that. And it takes a lot of food science, prototype, trying things, all the regulations. So we were able to help people blast through that, try to keep their headaches to a minimum if we can. The Innovation Center, that's what I was talking about. So that's also, we do that with a lot of partners. So it's a Massachusetts-wide. We work with New Entry Sustainable Farming and the Carrot Project and CISA, who help us cover the whole state, providing assistance to farmers. And that's one that actually, that's a USDA, as Jeff said, we've had that for 6 years. It's a grant program, and they cut it. The USDA cut that program, so it's not going to be around in the future. So a lot of farmers are going to not know where to go for assistance. So then we're going to get into some details about PVGrows Investment Fund, flexible financing, and technical assistance. And again, the technical assistance is a huge part of it. That people need money, but they also need to how best to use that money. I was going to say what Jeff left out, but I'll say after your awesome remarks. I think your history was about my same history. So I joined early on after Jeff got this thing going. And like I said, it made sense because we needed a lender and someone who understood farm and food businesses. So the CDC came in and helped out. And we had a staff because these things need a lot of, you need an experienced lender to do underwriting, but you need people who understand the farm and food world too. So that was why it made sense for us to be there. And then partnerships. Everything in community development requires partnerships. So there was this huge network that we had all kinds of people working in food and ag, but then we kind of narrowed it down to 6 or 7 that really have been with us since the beginning. So there's a lot of buy local organizations around, and out by us, it's called Community Involved in Sustaining Agriculture. They know all the farms sort of out in Western Mass. So they're a main partner, Department of Agriculture. And then we have 2 or 3 other loan funds that are there too. So if someone comes to PVGrows and we can't service them, then one of these other loan funds might be able to help them. And then one of the, at the early stages, we had that report that Jeff had up there. The consultant said we could raise $52 million in Western Mass. They did a survey, there's a lot of rich people. So we started smaller and said, let's raise $2.5 million and then see if we can lend that out. So actually in the early days, we actually got investors and then we didn't have the entrepreneurs at first. So we were a little out of balance. And then over the 10 years, it's kind of gone the other way. Then we get too many entrepreneurs and not enough money. So running these funds is always tricky because you don't want to have money sitting in the bank, not being used. But you don't want to have too many entrepreneurs waiting for it either. So trying to keep that balance. So we've raised 2.8 million and we want to go up to 5 million because there is still a demand from our entrepreneurs. So that balance of investors and entrepreneurs is really important. And then one of the other things is at the beginning, like Jeff said, there weren't a lot of people out there to steal ideas from. How do these things work? So we set an interest rate. We said we're going to pay investors 4%, and they invested for either 5 or 8 years. And so that worked, and we got a bunch of investors. But then we made some changes 3 years ago because that 4% paying to investors, we were losing money because we didn't want to raise the interest rate to our borrowers. So the farms, we don't want to charge them a high interest rate. So the way we operate the fund is on the difference between what we're paying our investors and what we're charging our entrepreneurs. So we lowered the interest we're going to pay to investors to 2%, and investors most of them stayed with us. So they weren't really as worried about what they were earning. They wanted to see that the money was being used. And then we shortened the term from 8 years to 3 years. That way, if people wanted to invest and then get out of it, they could do that after 3 years. So that made people feel more comfortable, I think, too. So these are evolving. You have to do a fancy offering memo each time you make changes. So you don't want to make too many changes, but we've got some, actually, I wanted to mention the inexperienced lawyers. That one of those guys now is making money because he learned how to do this. And now he's like a lawyer for people who are doing these offering memos. So I think we should have got a split on some of his take. We should have invested in him. So that's some of the background. And I think I'm going to hand it over to Hannah to talk about how things are going now.
Yeah, so this is the quick overview of just how the whole fund works. So we start with community investments. These are community members our minimum investment is $500. So it's a somewhat relatively low barrier to entry, all the way up to $250,000. They put their money into a pooled community investment pool. That money directly goes into our revolving loan fund. So that is the money that we have available as capital for loans to farms and local food businesses. So when a business applies, it's a regular, straightforward loan application. The but one of the first steps we do is we want to see a mission alignment. So the PVGrows mission is to help expand the agricultural viability, the environmental sustainability, and the rooted in community-ness of farms. Most farms in Western Massachusetts do tend to fit into that. We're not the land of giant monoculture agriculture, unlike a lot of farms in other parts of the country. So for the most part, a lot of people who come to us, it's pretty easy mission alignment, vote yes in favor, but it's really important that we keep that part of the process to make sure that we're upholding our values. And that's also what we tell investors, is that these are the types of businesses that you are investing in. So once they go through that process, and it's an advisory committee, John mentioned who some of those partners were, then that's when they go to the underwriting stage and they work with our lending department and work on showing their financials and their projections and all of that fun stuff. Where it does get actually fun, well, that is fun, but where I think it's really fun also is that we have a in-house technical assistance team as well as a network of business advisors. So a lot of businesses come to us and they're like, here are my financials, and it's literally a notebook. And we're like, great, let's get this organized into a spreadsheet. And they're like, spreadsheets? And you're like, it's okay, we will walk you through it. So that is what we do, is we walk people through getting their financials on a spreadsheet, looking organized, and any other help they might need. It might mean they're going into a different venture, adding to their farm, not just growing vegetables, but maybe they're doing something else, or maybe they're transitioning to organic. There are a lot of different scenarios that we're able to help with. So once they get all their financials and business plan ready and they go through the underwriting process, then they get a loan. So that goes to the farmers and food entrepreneurs. And it's a revolving loan fund. So when they pay their principal back, it goes right back into the revolving loan fund. So this is kind of our impact. So since the fund started, we've raised $2.8 million in community investments. That number changes all the time. As John mentioned, our investment term is 3 years. So that's kind of a flexibility to entrepreneurs, as people come take their investments out, they put them back in. So we're currently trying to reach a level of around 5 million, and that is to keep the fund at pretty much a self-sustaining level. Because right now, my work at the CDC and my colleagues, that subsidizes my work on PVGrows is subsidized by the CDC basically. So we're hoping that the 5 million mark will actually make it a little bit more sustainable for my role and my colleagues' roles. And so as of last calendar year, end of last 2025, so we've made 112 loans totaling over $7 million, and that's to about 77 businesses. So we have a lot of returning borrowers. Our average loan size is $63,000. Some loans are as low as $3,000, some are $250,000. It really depends. And what we try to do as flexible lenders is what we tell people is that we're not necessarily like working like a bank. We're not in this to earn money from them. We're a nonprofit lender. Our mission is to help people who don't traditionally have access to capital from a bank. There are other financing programs, such as those from the USDA or the Farm Credit East, but those are traditionally used for big like land purchasing, and those are also really big like projects that can be collateralized. So when a farmer just needs working capital, or they need to grow their flock of chickens, like who do they turn to? They turn to community lenders. We're able to be a lot more flexible to the seasonality of farmers, and any other thing that comes up, like crazy climate change effects that cause extreme flooding or drought, freezes, and all of the things that we've seen. a lot recently. So also say that our default rate, so that's the number of loans that we have to write off, is like industry-wide is very low. And that's really just speaks to our flexibility as a lender and also the in-house technical assistance that we provide. And lastly, so our geographic focus is mostly in Western Massachusetts. This is a map of our borrowers in Western Mass, but up to 30% of the fund can go outside of Western Mass. So we have a few borrowers in Eastern Mass too. So these are just the types of borrowers. So it's mostly farms. So even some of these other categories are actually also farms, like someone who has a farm stand is also a farm, that sort of thing. But we also support restaurants and cafes, or a value-added producer, like that would be someone who makes pickles, but 100% of the cucumbers are locally sourced. And with restaurants, we also have different eligibility criteria that the restaurants need to demonstrate that, when the season is okay with it, 50% of the food they source is local, or they source from at least 7 different farms, or just different ways of demonstrating that other food retail is a really strong part of the food system too, and supporting farms. So these are some examples of some of our clients. So we have, these are just the ones in Western Mass. So Maybell Farm is a dairy. They mostly just do milk and are kind of going into the world of cheese. Bardwell Farm is a diversified vegetable farm. So those are good examples of the more traditional agriculture of our clients. I mentioned a value-added producer, Real Pickles. They actually started out of our food processing kitchen and have since grown, which is really neat. They went through their own public investment process as well, and they're doing great. They're a worker-owned business, right?
I think 24 employees now, and it's a cooperative.
Yeah. Yep. Stillman Quality Meats is a meat processor, and they are currently opening the first USDA certified slaughter and value added processing plant for Massachusetts, and that's going to really greatly help the entire meat processing, local meat processing industry in Massachusetts. And then lastly, Daily Operation is a restaurant in East Hampton, and they just feature a really large number of local foods on their menu. So they're a great example of that. So kind of the world of moving from supporting local food as an investor is something that a lot of people have to wrap their minds around. A lot of people are like, I'm going to sign up for a CSA, or a community supported agriculture share, or I'm going to shop at the farmer's market, or, oh, there's a local food organization, I'll donate to them. So explaining the difference of investment is something that's a large part of my job. And so these are kind of the reasons why people invest, and they're kind of the key difference between investing and other forms of supporting local agriculture. So the first one is that there's a financial return to you. I mean, some investors actually do select a 0% interest, and basically they're treating it like a donation. But for the most part, investors select an annual fixed interest rate. And the main thing about that is that the amount of capital that's available for investing greatly outweighs the amount that's available for donating. And that's where this system is huge, and actually potentially it can systems changing, I would like to think. I don't want to overpromise that, obviously, but that's what I would want to hope. So that's really the main difference. And then because of the fact that it's a revolving loan fund, an investment helps many food businesses over time, so dollars go a lot farther. I mentioned that we've raised 2.8 million in investments and we've loaned out over 7 million in loans. So the impact of every dollar has almost tripled. And then also Massachusetts farmers really rely on it in the face of federal instability with everything. One of those are federal grants. And so a lot of farmers that had relied on those for maybe implementing climate smart practices can no longer rely on that impact on that income stream. And so we're seeing a higher demand because of that. And then also speaking to what our mission is, our borrowers are the ones who are supporting the local community through both who they're hiring, who they're providing food to, how they're growing food, and how they're also supporting the local food system at large. And then also, you know, I guess I spoke to this already about how I sort of see community investment as related to resistance. And also when you think about what most people think of as investing, it's your retirement stock portfolio. You know, for those of us who are lucky to even have that. So we always tell people they're not going to get rich with PVGrows. Like, that's not what we're here for. But what we are here for is it's an alternative way to invest money in a way that makes a big difference in the community itself. We also have we have a fair number of investors who also don't have stock portfolios of any kind, and they don't necessarily have the incomes to support stock portfolios, but they rely really strongly on their neighbors who are farmers, and they want to make sure that their neighbors who are farmers continue to be able to farm in the future, and so that's why they invest. That's about PVGrows. I also want to quickly mention the other program that I manage at. Okay, great. At Franklin County CDC, called the Mass Food Trust Program. It's kind of just another extension of how our work supports the food system in Massachusetts. And it is at the intersection of economic development and food access. It's a statewide program. The funding comes through the State Department of Agriculture, and then to us at Franklin County CDC, we administer the program for Western Mass, and then our colleagues at the Local Enterprise Assistance Fund, or LEAF, manage it in Eastern Mass. So it's financing through low interest loans, grants, and business assistance to food retailers. So basically like grocery stores, corner stores, even farm stands that serve low income, low grocery access communities. And since the funding comes through the MDAR, or the State Department of Agriculture, we also prioritize whenever that food can be locally grown. So just a little bit about the eligibility. The main is that they increase access to quality, affordable, healthy food. And most of basically, it is a program requirement that we take a couple of exceptions for, that the retailer accepts SNAP, WIC, and HIP, which is the Healthy Incentives Program, which there is, for those of you who follow state politics, there is a HIP lobby day this morning at the State House. So HIP is another great example of how we are connected to this world of, or how farmers support food access in Massachusetts. So again, it's a statewide program. We administer everything from Worcester County on west. And since 2018, we've funded over 100 projects. And we've been able to show that we've been able to expand healthy food access to over 750,000 people. And this is just a quick example of just the types of businesses that we support. Most of them are grocery stores. And what I also really like about this is it shows the number of farms or farm-related businesses that also support healthy food access. So, 14% are farms. There are farmers markets. There are mobile farmers markets. So that's always aligns with our mission. All right, so that wraps it up. So I think we're ready for questions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Nice. So
Okay.
hello. Hopefully we spark some interest and some questions. And if you want to invest, you can write a check now too, but.
Okay. Thank you so much for this, in a way, uplifting talk to see that you can also do good things with investments. So my question was about that part, and sorry if I missed that. First, a quick technical question. What is the interest rate of these loans? I'm sorry if I missed that. And the second question is, how do you attract investors? Who the investors are? Are you focusing only on normal people like us, or are you focusing on people or organizations or companies that have a much higher capital? So if you could talk a little bit more about the process of investor attracting, that would be great.
So as we said, right now, we pay the investors 2% for investing, and then we charge 7 or 8% to our borrowers. So that spread of a few percentage is what helps pay to sustain the program. And a lot of other lenders right now, well, as Hannah said, most of the loans we make are to people who can't get a traditional lending, but if they could, it would be probably at higher rates. So that's 7 or 8% works for most of them.
Yeah, and as far as who our investors are, a large part of the mission of the fund was also about democratizing capital. So as I mentioned before, the minimum investment is $500, which is one thing, but the other thing is that the fund is available to what are called non-accredited investors. So accredited investors are only people with a certain high net worth. So most types of alternative investment structures. Well, maybe John can, or Jeff can fact check me on this, but are only available to accredited investors. So it was very important that PVGrows be available to all types of investors. So, I mentioned before, some are folks who have never invested a day in their lives, but they feel a strong sense of solidarity with their farmers and their neighbors. Others are folks who are, maybe just middle-class professionals, and they do have a little bit of a retirement portfolio, but maybe they've decided to just set aside a small amount of that. Other folks are maybe what you would call higher net worth, and they're used to doing philanthropy. And so they're interested in how they can make some of their dollars go even farther.
And how do you attract those different kind of investors? How do they hear about you?
Word of mouth. I think we do a lot of our network is within Western Massachusetts. So it's within those people who support Franklin County CDC might hear about it. The local food world, I think, is pretty small. So usually it's when people hear about our partner organizations, like John mentioned, Community Involved in Sustaining Agriculture, or CISA. They have a very visible presence in Western Mass. So I think a lot of people who are CISA supporters also come to support us. But then also the answer is that we're constantly hustling, trying to reach more people. That's why Jeff has we've dragged him back into this to help us find those people. And it's, like I sort of mentioned, it's a really interesting I find that it's a big challenge to explain the difference between a donation and an investment, and why investment opens up way more, the potential for way more.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So you mentioned that often the loan people who get the loans aren't people who have access normally, and you also mentioned, you're helping them with finances a little bit. Like, how do you work a little bit more about like how you're supporting people to make sure that the loan that you're giving them, they're going to be able to pay back, and that their project is going to be successful if they maybe haven't, I don't know, done something with this amount of money before, or it's a new project.
I feel like that's an underwriting question.
Yeah, so before we make the loan, that's the main thing. We only make the loan when we think they're going to be able to pay it back. But we do have a lot of new folks that haven't had this access to credit. So that's why it's really relationship lending is what we really call it. So it's based on the projections, but then we follow through with them. And then the other reason why, and I'll admit this part of our default, our write-offs is pretty low, is because if someone does get into trouble, we can modify their loan and say, okay, this year, well, especially we had a drought one year and then we had floods the other year. And so some of the farmers just didn't get the income they expected. So we put them on interest only. So they just had a little payment for 6 months or something until their revenue comes back up again. And then we can prolong the loan, make it, instead of 5 years, make it 7 years. So we just work with them based on their cash flow. Whereas most traditional lenders don't like to do that. And so that's really when we say flexible funding, that's the main part of that. And then we try to bring in grants occasionally. And before COVID, we never talked about grants for businesses because that's not like a thing businesses we used to. But during COVID, there was some funding available. So we were able to get some small grants out to people, which really helped them make it through COVID. And now the state actually has some money for when there are other climate change kind of related problems with farms that they can come in with small grants. So that's been really helpful. You got questions?
We have an online question from Roland Hoke, one of the donors of this talk. His question is, you want to expand PVGrows to $5 million. Does demand from borrowers exceed your current lending capacity?
Yes. And like I say, it kind of comes and goes. Like I said, at the beginning, we had too much money, not enough entrepreneurs. Then we had too many entrepreneurs. Right now we have a higher demand than we have funding available. It's not a huge, and partly because we haven't done as much outreach. So as we get more money, then we'll do more outreach. And I really want to push this. There was the map that we do 70% of the lending in Western Mass and 30. We haven't even reached that 30%. So we haven't really marketed here in Eastern Mass. We're considering like taking the PVs for Pioneer Valley, taking that off of it and just making it a statewide program. We've had interest, like someone from the Cape Cod called and wanted to start a fund down there. And we said, you don't really need to start a fund. Just you work with the farm down there and then we'll make the loan to them. And so we really want to make this a statewide, and then the demand is going to, skyrocket, but hopefully investors will come from all over Massachusetts also. So is the one over here, Jeff? And getting back to that climate change thing, that's part of the environmental aspect of this. We sort of assume that you all understand that agriculture is keeping farms healthy and sustaining our land. And a lot of the farms we work with some of them call themselves regenerative or whatever, but they're adding to the soil, they're protecting our landscapes. And it's just, ag is a huge part of the environment, and we need to really support that for so many reasons. Yeah.
Cool. I had two questions. One, I was wondering, what role does racial equity play in the lending criteria? And the second question is, like, what percentage of projects or businesses, farms do you fund that are like new to PVCgrows, and how much are like sustained folks who you've lended to before and that you're consistently sustainably funding?
I'll start, but so racial justice is something that the CDC has been involved in for like, I wish I could say forever, but just like the last 8 or 10 years, we kind of are cranking it up a little bit. and we're still sort of struggling with it. There used to be, and I don't have the stats, but there used to be a lot of black farmers, and then a lot of them lost land over the past many years. And so we have an emphasis on that, and when we do get an application, we do treat it a little differently, but yet we still don't have that many applications. So it's this network that we need to all be working on to make sure. And then also, we actually have another project with some indigenous groups out in the Nipmuc tribe up around Orange and Athol. Again, a lot of those indigenous folks don't own land anymore, or only, just a plot. And we're trying to, how can they get land back? So right now our loan limit is only 250, and we want to also increase that limit for people who want to buy land, because land is more expensive. So we're open to suggestions, but it's on our radar. We also work with the Black Farmers Fund, which is out of New York, but they're working, I think, all over the Northeast. And their focus is on both land and capital to Black farmers. So that's a good collaboration there. So actually, one of our staff people just went over and is working with them now. So what was the other question?
About how many are new? Third? I want to say like a third is my best guess are new. And that's like startup businesses are also like even more challenged for getting traditional financing. So that's where we're a good resource for that.
Thank you so much for that talk. It's really cool to see. I guess my question is about local versus like thinking about being statewide. The Franklin County, Pioneer Valley, it gives you a sense of place. On the other hand, you want to expand. And so how do you keep that flavor of local? And then why not New England? What are the barriers to dropping down into Connecticut, which has a huge amount of agriculture too? So I'm kind of curious of how you struggle with scale.
Yeah, I feel like these are things that we have been very recently talking about. Pragmatically, increasing how big we are geographically gives challenges of underwriting, is that we're just less familiar with businesses that are in different parts of the region or different parts of the state. So when we do loans that are outside of Western Mass, we work with partners who are basically able to be a reference, or they might help with the TA directly. And so that's super helpful, but we're mindful of that when we're thinking of different regions. I think there are some folks who it might be a matter of that we almost need to take a survey of our investors and sort of get a sense of, because anecdotally, we know that some people are very aware that the food system is regional, and they appreciate the regionality of it. But then there are also those people who feel, again, very strongly about their neighbors being the one place that has consistently given them affordable ground meat. Yeah, I think it's definitely a challenge.
And we do try to use the word region instead of local sometimes. But this Real Pickles is a great example. Does anybody know about Real Pickles? So they decided early on that they were going to be a regional fermented pickle company, and they only buy their cucumbers and cabbage, and they make kimchi and all kinds of things now, but from the region. And they've changed that a little bit. I think they started 100 miles from where they were, and now they're a little bit further, and they do go into New York, and they only sell also in the Northeast. And that's gonna, most businesses that's going to grow, they keep expanding their market, but they're kind of trying to get deeper into the Northeast instead of trying to expand geographically, and that's their mission. And so there is and Jeff and I, we talked about it again today. When we started this, we said community, people, and we want the investors to see where their money's going and to go shop at these farmers markets and mobile markets. But yet, if we make a loan out east, that's local to the east. So everything's local at some point. But how to talk about that is still kind of challenging.
I also spoke about the challenge of getting investors who aren't familiar with the world of investing. I think it's also a challenge when we're trying to attract people who are familiar with the world of impact investing, and we're trying to distinguish ourselves, trying to explain that maybe you are familiar with impact investing, but did you know that you can invest in food and agriculture. And so I think that is also where we need to find that geographic sweet spot, because the world of potential investors is a lot broadened when we're thinking beyond Western Mass and beyond Massachusetts. But then also there are other community investment funds that are in our region. There's one in Vermont, there's one in New Hampshire, and they're doing really great work. We also don't want to step on their toes. They're already doing good work.
Okay, so this is the last question.
We also talk about food sheds and then watersheds. And since I'm here, I want to make sure everybody knows, where does the water, drinking water in Boston come from? Does everybody know? The Quabbin, which is out west, which was, a bunch of towns were flooded years ago to make this big thing. So we're all connected somehow, and a lot of times we don't know. So just actually getting that word out there is important.
You've kind of alluded to this in various ways, but I'm curious if you kind of like talk about your arc in the context of outside shocks. We've seen big ones. There's the pandemic, there's like the changing federal environment, which you've alluded to. The idea of grants, it sounds like that's another big transition. But also I'm thinking about the interest rates, and like in 2015, 2% for like an ordinary investor, like that would be quite generous. But interest rates have gone up a lot post-pandemic, and how does that affect you?
And that's what when we switched the offering from 4% to 2%, we were a little nervous, but I don't think it's that affected that. I won't say all, 90% of our investors, I think, rolled over into the new fund. So we kind of now think that that interest rate isn't a big deal, because we talk about value in money, but also the value, your own personal values. And that's really those are the investors we're looking for, who are investing with their heart and a little bit with their head, but they care about the values. And then so the interest rate market in Wall Street doesn't impact us too much. A little bit like CDs, people can have a safe investment in a CD at 2, 3 now, maybe a little changes, but so that's where we want to stay. And then again, with what's going on at the federal level, they're yanking out money. So I think more people in the community have to step up. And I like to think that, the Republicans who went for the tax cuts, they're saving money. They should take their money now and invest it locally, because they want to have more control. They don't want the government to invest for them. Well, take the money that you're saving in taxes and invest it in your community. So, there's some ways we can use that to our advantage, maybe. But anyway, we're glad to be here. And if you have any ideas, please let us know. Our website, our emails are there. If you can help us get the word out, if you've got more ideas for us, we're always open. These things are ever evolving, these funds. And as Jeff said, now there's a lot more out there to learn from. Boston Impact Initiative, UGMA Fund are here in Boston. So please look into them all.